Mark 5. Breaking through absolute deadlocks. Austin clears his throat, leaning over the open page of his Bible as the living room goes quiet. Look at how this chapter opens. The terrifying calm we just read about on the water wasn't just a random demonstration of power. It was a deliberate, confrontational advance straight into enemy territory, shifting the battlefield from the churning waves of the abyss directly onto a pagan shoreline saturated by maximum ritual pollution. Tyler taps his pencil against his open Greek text, nodding eagerly. Exactly, he lands in the country of the Gerasenes and is instantly confronted by a man emerging from the tombs who embodies a landscape of total, untamable desolation. Mark goes out of his way to detail the raw terror of the situation, describing how this man plucks iron chains apart like thread, howls night and day among the mountains, and gashes his own flesh with sharp stones because no human security system could contain him. Chloe shivers slightly, her fingers tracing the verse, and notice the name when Jesus demands his identity. The Spirit calls itself Legion, which isn't just a random word. It's an explicit socio-political parody of a 6,000-soldier Roman occupational army holding a human soul captive, just as Rome held the very soil they are standing on. Arthur adjusts his glasses, leaning into the circle. But the moment the uncreated voice of Jesus speaks, the regional stronghold fractures. He effortlessly commands the occupying force out, driving them into a commercial asset of 2,000 swine that immediately perform a violent, military-style stampede down the steep bank, drowning themselves in the exact sea chaos that was silenced the night before. Samuel points to the next verse, his expression darkening. What's wild is the reaction of the townspeople who rush out to see the commotion. Instead of throwing a feast because this violent man is suddenly sitting down, fully clothed and restored to his right mind, they are gripped by a deep undercurrent of fear and beg Jesus to leave their coast, proving they preferred a predictable, familiar brand of local chaos over an unmanageable divine presence. Sarah smiles, highlighting the final interaction on the shoreline. But Jesus completely subverts the messianic secret here. He refuses to let the delivered man get into the boat with him, giving him a countercommission to go straight home and broadcast this massive mercy, single-handedly igniting the real-time reclamation of the Gentile nations across the Decapolis before Jesus even sets foot there again. Austin turns the page, the crinkle of paper signaling the shift in geography. Now the narrative velocity changes instantly as we return to the Jewish Western Shore, where the author deploys a classic literary sandwich technique, weaving an anonymous woman's private crisis directly into the heart of a high-status community emergency. Hannah tracks the alignment on her page, her voice rising with enthusiasm. Look at the structural contrast between the two figures. You have Jairus, who represents the absolute peak of religious prestige and community wealth as a synagogue ruler, falling flat at Jesus' feet to beg for the life of his 12-year-old daughter who had enjoyed 12 years of life. Then, right in the middle of his journey, this nameless woman steps out of the shadows, having spent those exact same 12 years enduring a slow, agonizing death sentence from a chronic uterine hemorrhage that completely bankrupted her through useless medical treatments. Samuel leans forward, his finger anchoring the text. And according to Levitical purity boundaries, her continuous flow of blood made her a walking source of volatile ritual contamination, completely barring her from human contact under penalty of law. Tyler gestures with his hands to emphasize the crowd dynamics, which makes her tactical approach so incredible. Her faith drives her to break every societal rule, sneaking through the swarming crowd to execute a prohibited touch of Jesus' garment from behind, because she's whispering to herself that even touching his clothes will make her whole. Arthur nods quickly, his eyes widening, and right there the ancient law is flipped completely upside down. Traditional rules dictated that her deep uncleanness should automatically defile the rabbi, but instead, a magnificent inversion occurs where contagion flows in reverse. Her impurity doesn't compromise Jesus. Rather, the explosive holiness radiating from his body surges outward to instantly dry up the fountain of her blood. Chloe watches the text closely. Jesus stops the whole procession to ask who touched him, causing pragmatic confusion among the disciples, but he forces the woman to step forward in fear and trembling to confess the whole truth because he refuses to let her healing remain a secret transaction. Sarah claps her hands softly. He calls her daughter in front of the whole crowd, weaponizing his purity to offensively destroy her disease and restore her to community life rather than guarding his holiness through defensive isolation. Austin looks up, his face serious as the atmosphere in the room tightens. But while he's still speaking to her, the narrative momentum hits an absolute wall of despair. Lucas taps the text, pointing out the arrival of the servants. Messengers arrive straight from the synagogue ruler's estate with a definitive verdict of death, telling Jairus his daughter is gone and asking why he should trouble the teacher any further. Tyler speaks up quickly, his voice urgent. But Jesus completely intercepts the report before it can settle, looking Jairus in the eyes and commanding him to replace his immediate fear with absolute belief. Chloe visualizes the arrival at the house, her voice dropping. When they reach the estate, the quiet grief has already turned into a loud commotion of professional wailing mourners, but the moment Jesus challenges their finality by claiming the child is merely sleeping, their weeping instantly sours into mocking, cynical laughter. Lucas nods, his expression intense. That laughter shows the rigid cognitive barrier separating human skepticism from the architect of life, who views physical death as a temporary suspension rather than an irreversible termination. Arthur describes the action inside the house with rapid gestures. Jesus forcefully clears the room of all the detractors, takes only the inner circle of 3 disciples and the parents, and steps directly into the quiet death chamber, where he willfully violates corpse defilement guardrails by grabbing the cold hand of the deceased girl. Evelyn leans in, her eyes fixed on the final verses. But just like the leper and the hemorrhaging woman, death itself cannot withstand his somatic proximity. He issues the direct Aramaic creative mandate, Talitha koum, and the 12-year-old girl instantly stands up and begins walking around the room, sending the eyewitnesses into total, uncontained astonishment. Samuel laughs softly, pointing to the final sentence. And I love the stroke of mundane realism that closes the whole scene. Jesus strictly orders them to keep the miracle quiet and demands that they immediately get her something to eat, completely shattering any lingering illusion of a phantom vision or a collective hallucination by anchoring her resurrected flesh back into everyday physical reality.